Hello and welcome to this video on correcting bonsai trunk taper. Bonsai trunk taper is important for aesthetics and design. The common issues are a too small trunk and reverse taper, with too large a trunk being far less of an issue. Too small a trunk is a rather obvious problem. It can be resolved with some of the more common options available, as it often coincides with a young tree that still has a normal shape. In a similar vein, the trunk of an older or wild specimen may be too thick at a lower point. This can be part of developing an overzealous nabari or a yamadori that is grown in an unusual location or manner. Reverse taper is a related issue. It is a way of describing a tree that has more of a thicker growth in the trunk, high on the tree. This makes the trunk narrower toward the nabari or root flare than it is above. This could be something like these pollarded trees that have a wider top than base. These three situations exemplify the golden rule of triangles in bonsai, one with a triangle upright and the other inverted. In the first instance of a tree with too small a trunk that needs thickening, you can use the following. The first is a sacrifice branch. Start at the highest point you want to thicken and work your way down the tree. A full detailed description of this process can be found in the top right corner. The second option is nabari techniques previously described. This involves trying to grow the root base and bottom of the trunk out wider. This works by encouraging root growth, that in turn requires a wider trunk. This supports growth and encourages it. In the case of a trunk that is too thick, you have fewer options. A trunk cannot be made smaller, and so addressing this taper issue needs to be approached differently. The simplest approach is to compensate for the branch structure through sacrifice branches. This will help to thicken the branches that are currently too small over time. This will balance the trunk size in the end. Another option is to create a shari. This is a deadwood section of the trunk that draws off growth from the trunk width while the scar heals over. This is a rather extreme solution that can work for suitable specimens in certain situations. It works because rather than having the tree add bulk to the width, it instead attempts to grow in towards the missing bark. This in turn creates scar tissue that can be constantly worked on to create not only a smooth finish, but to control the growth in that area. These options will solve your normal trees that are smaller at the top than they are at the bottom. Reverse taper is a different story. Take this tree as an example. It has a narrow point right above the root flare. It can be resolved with the following three options. The first is bruising the trunk. By damaging the trunk in this area, it causes swelling that heals over, and like a callus, it is thicker. This is similar to how you make branches more pliable. The trunk will need a lot of support while this happens, as the tree will be weakened drastically. You can bruise it using something like a hammer or other solid object and gently tapping on the side of the trunk. The second is a sacrifice branch. As with thickening a trunk in general, this can be done with sacrifice branches that are grown from a point just above where the constriction begins. The third is a root graft. This is a slightly different take on grafting and shari. The simplified version is that a small section of trunk is removed to create an open wedge. A matching species is selected, and the root and a section of trunk is removed. This trunk piece needs to be sized to match the cleft cut from the trunk, or conversely, the cleft needs to match the graft. This is then dipped in growth hormone and taped to the tree. Over time, the two should merge. The alternative is to use an inner graft. This is where you butt the graft plant against the tree where the bark has been removed. The graft grows against this and into the soil, creating a sort of aerial root that will eventually widen and fill in the void between the trunk and root. Once the graft takes, you can then cut off the top part of the plant or take an aerial layer. These two pieces should then merge, and the trunk will be larger around the root and trunk section. These options are not perfect, as taper is very specific to each tree, but will give you a place to start from when trying to fix issues, or provide a better platform from which to work to create fixes to issues. Thank you for watching this video. If you have found it interesting or useful, consider liking, sharing, and subscribing. Please post any comments, questions, or suggestions below.